We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph and Meseches Beitzah. This is Beitzah Daf 37a. The Gemara says the Islay Isha Ubanim. The reason why it's not necessarily a mitzvah to get married is we're talking about a person who already has a wife and children. Rashi over here says the Islay Isha Ubanim Shnei Zacharim LeBeis Shammai, meaning you have two males according to Beis Shammai, O Zachar and Nekeva LeBeis Hillel, or according to Beis Hillel, if you already have a male and a female child, so then again you've already fulfilled Pru Revu. That's why it might not be a mitzvah. Vesulo Mifkad Kuli Hai Kedamrin and Biyavamas. There's not such a commandment beyond that. Umiya Ktsas Mitzvah Ika. Rashi points out there is some mitzvah over here. Again, the idea is, even though you fulfill the mitzvah, the basic mitzvah, there still is more that can be done. The Gemara continues at the two dots, quoting the Mishnah, Lo Cholzin V'lo Miyavmin. Again, it said in the Mishnah, you're not allowed on Shabbos and Yontiv to do Chalitza and Yibam, and again, it did not refer to those as a mitzvah. So the Gemara says the same thing, V'ha mitzvah kavid. Isn't this a mitzvah? So the Gemara says, Lo no tzrich, it's needed, Di'ika gadol u'mitzvah begadol yavim. There's an older brother, and the mitzvah lechatchil is that the oldest brother or the older brother should do the yibum. V'kulu time amai, and the Gemara says, and what's the reason why all of these things are prohibited on Shabbos and Yontiv? Gezeira shema yichtov. There's a decree that if you do these things, you might end up coming to write things down, which would of course be an Isser D'Oraisa. Rashi over here says, mitzvah begadol ha'achim liyavim. The oldest of the brothers should do the yibum. V'naf kolon mi v'hoya ha'bechor. That's learned out from a pasuk. Shema yichtov psak din ledinin. In other words, the reason why you can't do any of these things, according to the Mishnah, is you might write down. For example, when you have a court case, you might write down the psak din. Ushtar eris in l'kiddushin, you might write a document for a marriage. Ushtar chalitza l'choletzes, if you're doing chalitza, there's a star that goes with that. Uchsuba liyavama, and if you're doing yibam, you write a ksuba for that. So again, that's the reason why all these things are prohibited on a derabanan level. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, quoting the Mishnah, Ve'elu hein mishum mitzvah. The following things are a mitzvah, but again, they're prohibited on Shabbos and Yontiv. Lo makdishin, v'lo ma'arichin, v'lo ma'achrim. And all of these things are basically the idea of sanctifying things to hektish. And the Gemara says, why is that a problem? Gezeira mishum mekach u'memkar. The reason is it's a decree that you might come to do sales, buying and selling on Yontiv and Shabbos, which would be prohibited. Now Rashi over here says, mishum mekach u'memkar dila mekach u'memkar damu. They're similar to mekach and memkar. If you consecrate something to the Beis HaMikdash, that's kind of like a sale. Shemotzi mirishus, so rishus hektish. You're taking it from your rishus, and the guy is putting it to the rishus of hektish, from his rishus to hektish. Umekach umemkar osir min hamikra. Now Rashi points out, buying and selling is osir from the pasuk, because again, the point over here is, it's all a gezeira that you're going to end up doing mekach umemkar. Now, if mekach umemkar is only midrabanan, you'd have a problem. You don't make a gezeira that you might come to do something midrabanan. So Rashi says, mekach umemkar is osir from the pasuk. Techsiv mimtzo chevtzecha v'daber dover. It says in the pasuk, now it is a pasuk in Navi, but the pasuk in Navi says, again, you're not allowed to do your regular weekday doings, meaning, again, like business deals. Inami, or Rashi suggests another approach, you could say mekach umemkar asili dechsiva. If you come to do mekach and memkar, you're just going to write things down. Shtari mechira, you write down documents of the sale. V'im tomer havela gezeira legezeira. So then you're going to say, well, one second, that's a decree to a decree. I can't consecrate something because I might do mekach umemkar because I might come to write something down. We don't usually do gezeira legezeira. So Rashi says kula chada gezeira. It's all really one big gezeira. Mekach umemkar, writing things down, etc. It's all in the same category, and therefore there is a gezeira ultimately that you're going to write things down. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, quoting the Mishnah, v'lo magbiyin trumos u'maiser. So you're not allowed to take off truma and maiser on Shabbos and Yontiv. The Gemara says pshita isn't that obvious. Of course, you're not allowed to do it because you're really fixing the food. You're taking it from a state of tevel, it can't be used, and you're doing a tikkun. And so the Gemara says, Tani Rav Yosef taught lo nitzracha ela litna lekohen lebo bayom. The chiddush over here in the Mishnah is that let's say you want to give it to the kohen on that very day. So if you want to give it on the kohen that very day, that already is a chiddush that you're not allowed to take off the trumas and maestros. Rashi says, Tani Rav Yosef hafilu litnim lekohen bo bayom diikol memar lav mukcha milsahi delisakune tivla mechaven. At that point, it's not clear that you're trying to fix the tevel. The ein yodua sheyeu tzarech l'shirayim v'roim shemolech truma lekohen u'michsi kula milsa mishum simchas yantiv. In other words, when you take off truma and immediately give it to the kohen, so it's not clear that you're doing it because you want to use the remaining parts, that you wanted to fix the tevel, because it actually seems like you wanted to give it to the kohen because of simchas yantiv. The kohen shetzarach lahu afilu hachiyasa. In other words, the kohen needed it for yantiv, so it doesn't look like you're fixing the remaining tevel. What it looks like is you're giving truma to the kohen, a way of celebrating yantiv. So you might think that's permitted, and that's why it says in the Mishnah, no, nevertheless, that's going to be usher. And the Gemara continues, Vahani mili piri de tevili masmal. Now all of this applies to fruits which were tevel from the day before. In other words, they only became tevel the day before. But let's say you have fruit that became tevel right now on Shabbos or Yontif. Kagon, for example, Isa lafrusha min achala. Let's say you have a situation where you made dough. This would really apply on Yontif. Let's say you had a situation where you made dough on Yontif, and so it only was chayiv and chala on Yontif, and you want to separate the chala, mefarshinan v'yavinan lekohen. So then we would be able to separate it and give it to the kohen, because in that situation, it only became tevel immediately on Yontif. You're basically making the challah on Yontif. You're preparing it all on Yontif, and so then once you make the dough, now you have to separate the challah. That would not be a problem. And the Gemara now says, "V'hani mishum reshus ika mishum shavus leka." What is this term reshus? Now we already explained this when we did the Mishnah, but the Gemara is asking, what is this term reshus? Are these things a reshus and they're not a shavus? Are they not isur midrabanan? They're all isur midrabanan in the Mishnah. V'hani mishum mitzvah ika mishum shavus leka. Same thing in the part of the Mishnah that called certain things a mitzvah. Those are mitzvahs and not shavus. Those were also asur midrabanan. Everything that was listed in the Mishnah was a shavus. It was all listed as isurei derabanan. And so the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yitzchak says, Lomi boy kamer. The way the Mishnah is phrasing it, it's a lomi boy, meaning not only this, even this. Meaning lomi boy shvus graded to the asr. Not only something that is only a shvus, that's going to be asr not only on Shabbos, also on Yontif. Ela afilu shvus de rishus nami asr. Even if you have a shvus, which is a rishus, meaning it's sort of a little bit of a mitzvah, even that remains asr on Yontif, just like Shabbos. Velomi boy shvus de rishus asr. Not only a shvus of a rishus, and again a rishus is like a slight mitzvah. Not only is that asr on Shabbos and on Yontif, elafilu shvus de mitzvah nami asr. Even if it is a shvus, an isur midrabanan of something that is a real mitzvah, even that is asr on Yontif, just like it is asr on Shabbos. The Gemara continues at the two dots, quoting the Mishnah, Kalelu b'Yontif amru. It said in the Mishnah that all of these things are true on Yontif and on Shabbos, and the only difference between Yontif and Shabbos is that on Yontif ochel nefesh you can prepare food, and on Shabbos you're not allowed to prepare food. But otherwise, the Mishnah said there's no difference between Yontif and Shabbos. And so the Gemara says, Uraminu, we have a contradiction. Mashil and derech haruba b'Yontif avalo b'Shabbos. Earlier in the Masechet we said that let's say you have a situation of fruits on the roof that are going to be ruined by the rain, so on Yontif you're allowed to lower it through the skylight to protect against the loss of money, but on Shabbos you're not allowed to do that. So you see there is a difference between Yontif and Shabbos that has nothing to do with the preparation of food. And so the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, Lo kash, it's not difficult. Ha Rabbi Eliezer, ha Rabbi Yoshua. It's really a machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. In other words, it's a machlokas tanoim, whether there are other differences between Yontif and Shabbos. The Tanya, as we learned in a Beitzah, Oso v'yas benosha naflu labor. This is talking about on Yontif. Let's say you have a situation where a mother animal and then the child, they fell into a pit. Now the halach is, you're not allowed to shecht the mother animal and the child animal on the same day. So here you have a problem over here, because you're going to try to save these animals from the pit, but you're not even going to be able to use them both on Yontif. So what are you supposed to do? You're not allowed to do all this work if it's for no Yontif purpose. So Rabbi Eliezer says, Mala sarishon al manas l'shochto. What you do is you're able to save the first animal on condition to shecht it, v'shochto, and you can shecht it for Yontif. V'hasheni also lo parnasu b'makomo kadei shelo yamas. But the other one you have to leave in the pit, and you just give it food down there so it should survive until the end of Yontif so it doesn't die. Rabbi Yoshua says, you can bring up the first one on the condition that he's going to shecht it. But then he doesn't shecht it. He changes his mind. And then he goes and he does an artifice. Again, what he's basically doing is he's doing what's called a harama. He's using a loophole. And then he says, I changed my mind. I don't want to shecht the first one. And then he brings up the second one. Now he's got both animals in front of him, and he chooses. If he wants to shecht this one, he shechts it. He wants to shecht the other one, he shechts it. In other words, Rabbi Yoshua is applying a leniency in order to save your money on Yontif. So you see exactly this. According to Rabbi Yoshua, on Yontif we're being lenient in a situation of hefsid mammon, of loss of money. Rabbi Eliezer does not agree to that. That's exactly what's going on in our Mishnah. The Mishnah, which says that on Yontif you're allowed to save the fruits from this loss of money, protect the loss of money, that again, that follows the opinion of Rabbi Yoshua, that we're lenient when it comes to losses of money on Yontif, and Rabbi Eliezer would be more strict. So the Gemara says, what kind of comparison is this? Amar le Abaye, so Abaye said to him, Mimai, how do you know that these cases are comparable? Maybe Rabbi Eliezer is only strict in the case of the animals in the pit because there's another solution. You can feed the animal while it's in the pit. But over here, where it's not possible, there is no other way to save these fruits. So no, he wouldn't be so strict. Maybe everybody would be lenient in the case of the fruits. Inami, or Adkan lo kamer Rabbi Yoshua. So maybe Rabbi Yoshua only says it over there by the case of the animals in the boar. Because there it's possible impossible to employ this kind of artifice, this kind of loophole. But here where there is no other solution, so then again, so maybe Rabbi Yoshua would say that you don't have this leniency because you don't have the possibility of a harama. And so the Gemara tries another answer. Elo Amar, a Papa says, Lokash, it's not difficult. Ha Beis Shammai, ha Beis Hillel. In one case, we're talking according to the position of Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai would be more strict, and Beis Hillel would be more lenient. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, Beis Shammai, Omer, Beis Shammai say, Ein motziin lo es hakatan, velo es halolo, velo es sefer Torah, lo shas harabim. According to Beis Shammai, you're not allowed to take the katan, a minor, or a lulav, or a sefer Torah to shas harabim. In other words, we're only lenient by ochel nefesh, but if you're not doing something for the preparation of food, we don't apply any leniency on Yontif. Well, Beis Hillel matir, and Beis Hillel say, no, it's mutter. In other words, Beis Hillel say that once we allowed hotzah for the purpose of ochel nefesh, we allow for other purposes of Yontif as well. So Beis Hillel is more lenient. So again, the Gemara is suggesting the same thing when it comes to the fruits, protecting the fruits. Beis Hillel would be lenient. Beis Shammai, though, would be strict. But the Gemara says again, Dil Malohi, maybe not. Maybe it's not a good comparison. Ad kan lo ka'amri Beis Shammai hasam ela hotzah. Maybe Beis Shammai only say by hotzah. Beis Shammai is strict when it comes to something like hotzah. Hotzah in general is an isha doraisa, so the Beis Shammai is strict. Avola tiltal lo, but maybe when it comes to tiltal, they wouldn't be so strict. And so the Gemara answers, Atu tiltal lav tzorach hotzahu. Even tiltal is really just something that has to do with hotzah. It's intimately connected with hotzah, because what is the issue? The issue is you're picking things up, you're moving them around, you're not allowed to do that, and that all will lead to hotzah. Rashi over here explains, Atu tiltal lav tzorach hotzahi. Isn't tiltal just a tzorach hotzah? Tchilas hotzah ali de tiltal. The way Rashi understands is the beginning of hotzah. How do you transfer something from one domain to another domain? Let's say from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim. It's through tiltal. You got to move the object. V'chol ma shegazru einu ela mishum hotzah. The entire gezerah on tiltal was really because of hotzah. V'haydelo gazru al tiltal kelim v'ochlim. Now, why did they say? They should have said you can't move anything around on Yontif. You can't move around kelim. You can't move around ochlim on Shabbos as well. Why did they say that? Because that would have been impossible to make such a gezerah. You can't move around anything, even vessels, even food would be impossible. Levatel onek Shabbos for Simchas Yontif. That would be a bittul of onek Shabbos and Simchas Yontif. It would be a nullification of onek Shabbos and Simchas Yontif. So that was impossible. But tiltal really again is totally in the category of hotzah. So again, the same basic answer. Beis Shammai, who's strict on hotzah and Yontif, would be strict on tiltal and Yontif as well. So you wouldn't be able to move the fruits through the skylight. And Beis Hillel would be lenient. The Gemara continues with the Mishnah. Habehema v'hakelim keragle habaylim. If you have animals or you have vessels, utensils, they follow where the owners can walk. In other words, when it comes to the halachas of tchum, there's a halacha you're not allowed to walk outside of the halachic boundary, tchum Shabbos and tchum Yontif. So on Yontif, the animals and the kelim, they follow. They're allowed to go as far as the owner is allowed to go. Rashi over here says, Habehema v'hakelim keragle habaylim ein adam yachol laholicha b'Yontif ela b'makom sheba'aleh yicholin leilech. If someone is carrying, let's say, these kelim on Yontif, you can't take it beyond where the owner of the kli is allowed to walk. V'im lo iriv, and if there's no, let's say the person didn't make an erev tchum, yesh la apayim l'chol ruach here, it can only go 2,000 amos every side of the city. That's the extent of the boundary. V'im irev l'tzafon gam yitelech l'tzafon v'lo dorim. Let's say the owner made an erev because he wants to travel north, which limits how far he can go to the south. So then again, the kelim as well will only be allowed to go north and not south. And the Mishnah continues, Hamoser behemto livno o liroa. Let's say somebody gives his animal over to his son or to a shepherd. Hareelu karagle habaylim. It still follows the ragle habaylim. It follows again the owner's feet where the owner's tchum is. Kelim hamiyuchadin le'echon min ha'achen shebebayis. Let's say you have kelim and they're designated. They really belong to one of the brothers in the household. Hareelu karaglav. So it follows his feet again. It follows his tchum. V'she'ein miyuchadin. Now if it's not designated to one particular brother, hareelu kema. So then it has to follow where everybody is allowed to go. In other words, if everybody is allowed to go to certain areas, then it can follow those areas. For example, if some of the brothers would make an erev to the north and some to the south, so that would be very limited then, because the people who made to the north can't travel south, so the kelim can't travel south, and the people who made the erev to the south can't travel north, so it can't travel north either. So it would be very limited in where you could take those kelim. Hashoel kli mechaver me'erev yontiv. Now let's say somebody borrows a kli from his friend from before yontiv. So karagle hashoel, then that kli follows the tchum of the borrower. B'yontiv, but if you actually borrow it on yontiv itself, karagle hamashel. So then it follows the tchum of the lender because it goes by the beginning of yontiv. At the beginning of yontiv, it was in the possession of the lender, so it follows the tchum of the lender. V'cheino isha, similarly by a woman, sheshala mechavirta tavlin umayim umelach lisa. So let's say she borrows from her friend spices and water and salt for her dough. Harayelu karagle shteyan. So in that situation, it's going to follow the ragle shteyan. It's going to follow both of them. And the Mishnah continues, Rabbi Yehuda poter b'mayim mimnei she'ein bahen mamish. Rabbi Yehuda says you can be lenient by water because water does not have any substance. Now Rashi over here says, keragle shtein, by the case of the women, it follows both of them. Ein molichos osam ela l'makom sheshtein yecholos leilech. It has to go only to areas that are common to both of them. The kaven to be yontiv shala, because since she borrowed on yontiv itself, kanu hatavlin o hamayim v'amelech shvisa etzel balein. They already had shvisa by the original owner, so therefore she obviously can't take it beyond where she can go, the borrower, but the actual water, salt, etc., so they have the shvisa by their original owner, so that's why it's stuck between both of them. She'ein behen mamish, and again, the Mishnah at the end said, Rabbi Yehuda said water has no substance. Ein nikaros lo b'kedera v'lo b'isi. You can't even see the water in a pot or in a dough. Hilgach ein ma'akvos holachas, and therefore that's not going to hold things back. You just borrow the water, that's not going to hold the person back from taking the entire pot somewhere. The Gemara is going to say we're talking about a thick tavshil, so you can't see the water in there. Okay, so Rashi says we'll talk about the melach in the Gemara. Why by the melach? The Rabbi Yehuda is not arguing. And the Gemara says, Masnisin, our Mishnah, Rashi over here says, Masnisin de Katani, Hamoser behemto loroa beyontiv hare elo karagle habaylam velo karagle haroa. Our Mishnah, which says that if a person gives his animal over to a shepherd on yontiv, so it follows the original owner and not the shepherd, and we'll identify the author of our Mishnah in the next video on Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Beis.